when you say, how do you deal with those insecurities? You need to examine why you have them. And what is it that you're afraid of losing? Control, authority, respect. What is it? And I know that not many leaders want to lose control, authority, or respect. And so they make some decisions at times that ultimately cause the loss of control, authority, and respect because they didn't know why they were acting that way. And so that's what that look in the mirror can do, is ask yourself the why question. Why do I feel this way?
Johnny Sirpilla, it is so good to see you again. You look like you're getting younger, not older. And welcome back on the Today Count show. I'm really excited to see you again and talk about what we've been wanting to talk about from the very beginning, leadership. So welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to be back for, I think, the third time now. So we've had some fun conversations, and I appreciate you and the messages that you're putting out there.
Well, thank you. Well, we've covered a lot in the podcasts that we have done, all kinds of different things from what you and your bride and your family have gone through, and how God has used that and shaped that, not only in your lives but in others. We've talked about adoption. I've had your beautiful daughter on the show, and it was great listening to her talk about her journey, where she's at and how she's learning and sharing that with others. But today, it's going to be a great talk. I already know, because we're going to just, open up the hood, lay it out. This is going to be a great podcast for mentoring leaders, probably any age, at any place in time. But just to catch everybody up, let's talk a little bit about your leadership credentials, just so that we set the table for those. Now, as I understand it, you were involved. You may want to go back earlier. I don't know. It's up to you. But I kind of pick up your story about the time you were working in your family business. But why don't you catch us up from there?
Absolutely. So I have experience, Jim, in small business, in family business that grew into large business, and then also national scale. And so I sold my family business that I was operating for about 15 years. When I was 36 years old, I sold it to Camping World. We were an RV dealership. And then I went on to become president and then eventually chief business development officer for Camping World and Good Sam, and was in that role for about 15 years, and then exited and retired after our IPO. And so it was a great run to understand culture of businesses all over the country as we built and bought up to several hundred stores. Excuse me. And so I saw business on a individual and regional scale, if you will, and then also saw it in the rolled up section. And so we had, north of 10,000 employees, and it was an environment of course, layers of management and executives and teams and all facets of the industry. And I was really privileged and honored to serve with such great leaders and peers with me on the team. And so I really learned a lot about leadership on a national scale. And it's really not all that different on a local scale and in an individual business. And so, I ultimately landed at a spot, and we can dig into this today. I landed at a spot where understanding first and foremost that the hardest person to lead is yourself. John Maxwell talks about that principle so beautifully. And that's because we judge others by their actions, and we judge ourselves by our intentions. So we are really hard on other people, typically, and we're soft on ourselves because we had good intentions. We didn't do and follow through what we intended to do, but we knew that we had the heart for it. And so we give ourselves that credit. Unfortunately, we don't give that credit to other people when they let us down, when they don't do what we deem to be the appropriate action. And so I learned first and foremost that the hardest person to lead is yourself. And so for me, I had to get my house in order. And when I say house, really my mind in order, because I saw an incredible responsibility that it was to lead other people. And I realized that I couldn't do that with respect from them unless I had my stuff together, and I worked hard to do that.
That, I love what you said there about we judge others based upon what we see, their behaviors, their outcomes, those kinds of things, and yet we tend to say, well, I didn't mean for that to happen. Well, I had intended for it. I wanted it to come out this way. I wanted it to come out that way, but it didn't. What do you think? What do you think this is true? What do you think this is mostly true, that we do that, where we judge ourselves on our intentions versus what we do?
I think it's people have a hard time being honest with themselves and having a good, honest look in the mirror. And unfortunately for me, or maybe fortunately in the case of leadership, my biggest challenge that I've had to deal with myself is my self-criticism. And I give such honest looks in the mirror that I'm oftentimes so disappointed in what I see, and feeling that I'm not living up to what God had planned for me, or honoring the skills and gifts that God gave me to use. And so for me, it's really become a challenge to deal with professionally and personally when my look in the mirror is so critical. I think I'm unusual that way. I think a lot of us are hard on ourselves, but not hard enough where we really own it and require actions to change, where we continue to allow ourselves the permission slip. Well, I wanted to do better there, and so next time I will. And the next time you get up to bat and you just do the same thing that you did before. Why? Because it's a pattern. It's easy to go down that path. We've been down that path before. We have hard times challenging ourselves and admitting at times that I don't know what I'm doing here. I need help. I need to go ask for assistance. And I don't say that that's a male or female thing. I think all of us at times, I think women are better at acknowledging those opportunities at times, but I think we all have times in our lives where, we, have heard that statement, fake it till you make it. And, there's some sides of that it can apply where you just need to kind of carry yourself in a way that isn't showing all your cards all the time. But the downside of fake it till you make it is that you're just faking it, and you're, eventually falling into something good, maybe not really in the path, and without recognition for the damage it's causing others in your wake. And so for me, I think it starts with that honest look in the mirror to say, my actions impact others. What I am doing and saying, verbally and non-verbally, the way that I'm walking through a plant or facility, that I'm walking through a sales showroom, I'm walking through the office, people are forming judgments and thoughts. And I need to be aware that they might have thoughts that they hope that their leader interacts with them and says hello and good morning. And I might not be in a hello and good morning space because I'm off to a 911 situation. But there's ways to do that where you can acknowledge the people around you. And I say this, Jim, with all balance and normalcy, that of course, 911s, you're taking care of things, but maybe there's a time after to clean that up, to say, hey, I'm so sorry I blew through here. I know that probably looked pretty scary. I was dealing with a situation. It is that consideration for others. And how much does it really mean to us? Does it mean anything to you? And when I say this to you, the listener, the leader out there, does it mean anything to you of how you impact someone else's day? Does it sadden you? Does it disappoint you to know that you could have taken some of their energy out of their energy pool and wasted it, knowing that everyone has 100% energy pool every day? There's not 200%, there's not 500%. Everyone has 100%. And if we take out of that, if we make those withdrawals unnecessarily, do we care? I think that's maybe a first place to start, is asking yourself if you care.
Oh, wow. That's really good. You got me thinking, Johnny. Let me get this out of my head so I can continue to follow along with you. When I think about leading yourself, which is kind of where you've said this all starts. Leadership starts with leading ourselves. I want us to dive into this because, in my experience, boy, you just nailed it. And I'm gonna talk about others in a second. But first, let's go ahead and get my dirty laundry out here. I think for me, if I had to define myself, I would say I've always been a get it done kind of a guy, type A personality, go, 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 go. And I might even say in some ways I can be task oriented, especially when I am stressed, when I am under pressure. I stop leading through others, and I will lead around, over, and under, which of course is not what I want to do. It's not who I want to be. And I'm not exactly, a spring chicken anymore, and I should know better. But here's some things that I still struggle with in my 60s. I think I still am unrealistic in what I think I can get done in one day, in 1 week, in 1 month. Extremely unrealistic. And if I do get them done, Johnny, it's like I just got done doing a triathlon and I'm collapsing at the finish line, and people are throwing those funny blankets over me, and and maybe looking to do CPR or something like that. And then I got nothing left, right? I got nothing left for my wife and my grandkids and my kids and my friends. And then I think where I do line up with you is the self-criticism part. I think that my work is never good enough. It's never enough. It's never enough. And so even this morning, when I was practicing what I do in a routine just about every day of the week, where I'm just slowing down, I'm looking at my playbook, I'm opening up my reading, which is a combination of scripture and something else. I felt even this day, which technically is a holiday, but I felt even this day on President's Day, I felt the noises creeping in. I felt the demands creeping in. I felt all of those things creeping in. So right away, I just connect with you 100%. Where said it all starts with leading ourselves. Now, you said it starts also with an honest look at ourselves in the mirror. That'd be, it sounds like step one. But you also kind of punched us in the nose here when you said, do we really care, right, about how we impact others? What are some other things that you are doing, Johnny, to lead yourself, or that you've learned to do, besides taking an honest look at well, I tell you what, let me back up. What do you mean by taking an honest look at yourself in the mirror, besides asking yourself, do I care about how I impact other people? What else do you mean by that?
Well, that honest look in the mirror connects right to the do I care. Asking yourself when you look in the mirror, do I really care about how I make other people feel? And I'm not saying that work is all about feelings. So anyone that wants to go down the rabbit hole of, we've got goals and we have things to accomplish and you can't worry about how people feel. Respectfully, I get all that. I'm a type A driver. In the DISC profile and the DISC model, I'm a dominant influencer, so I'm DI. So I get it, right? So we know we're wired the same, Jim. And so I'm all about results. My undergraduate degree is in accounting, so I care about numbers and the finances and the P&L, cash flow. All of that has to work. My graduate degree is in organizational behavioral management. And the reason I went back to grad school for that is because I really wanted to understand how to drive and lead people, right? And understand their behaviors. So anything that I'm saying is always in the full context of, this isn't about soft and feely and all of that. This is about getting results and driving people to their best possible outcome. So I ask the question, do I care? Because there's times that I've had to examine my own conscience going into a situation, let's call it a difficult situation that is intense, that where is my heart on the win-lose proposition here? Am I looking for a win-win because I care about them and I want a better outcome and I want both of us to win? Or is there a win-lose scenario here? I found in my career, there's less needs for win-lose and better opportunities with partners, manufacturers, vendors in a win-win scenario where we work together for something better, for something that individually we could not create ourselves. And that's what I'd like to see. So I've had to ask myself, do I care how the other person feels? And if my answer to that question is yes, then my actions need to reflect it. I need to use words that reflect that I care. I need to set the stage for success and let them know that I do genuinely care and I want this best possible outcome. We're going to talk about something here today which may appear to be challenging, but I'm very confident that if we come to the table with care and concern for each other's perspective, I think we can create a win-win scenario here. When I use words like that, I'm caring about what they feel, and I care what they feel because ultimately it impacts how they respond to me. So, it's that thought, that quote from Vince Lombardi. Once you gather their heart, once you capture their heart, they'll follow you anywhere you need to go. Leadership isn't just about leading your own employees. Sometimes it's leading business negotiations. It's leading competitors. It's leading vendors and partners. And so we want those people to follow us. We want to get what we believe is what's best for our constituents and our stakeholders. And so what I've seen, my experience has shown me, Jim, is that people who I think don't care how I feel or how another employee feels, I think they're pretty obvious with it. Their words, their intensity, their disregard for others, and they create a host of other problems that follow.
I love this. We both identified ourselves as type A individuals, and then you brought out the DISC profile, which I think was originally created for sales so that you could quickly assess somebody and how to communicate, to them. If they're a high D, get right to the bottom line. If they're a high I, you need to have some fun in it, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a high C, you need to be very detailed and your process. If you're a high S, then it needs to be very relational, very personable. Those are just quick overviews. But if I heard you right, you were kind of defending type A people, saying that just because someone's a type A doesn't mean that they don't care about people. In fact, you being a type A person and myself, I think we'd both say we do care. But the issue is, have we learned the disciplines and the behaviors and the skill sets to make sure that people know that, not to serve ourselves that they know that, but so that they really know that, so that they really know that we can have hard conversations about achieving things. I have a question for you as you continue down this road here about leading self. Started anyway, right? You said it starts with leading self, so I assume you've got some other things to say about it. Okay, Johnny, how do you organize in the sense of leading yourself? How do you, as a leader, because today you may have retired, but I think the truth is you retired from one company and now you're doing a whole new thing. How do you organize your week as a leader? How do you go about organizing your month, your approach to life? What does that look like?
And you're right, Jim. I retired from a career that I spent 30 years in. And then I'm not retired today, I'm repurposed, right?
That's good.
And we all need to be purposeful every day. And while I don't have a job per se, that I collect a paycheck, I have a lot of engagements and investments that require me to be thoughtful and mindful of others. And so the way that I approach my work today is very similar to the way that I approached my work when I was receiving a paycheck and I was working, whether it was for my own company or for Camping World, is that I come to work every day with the mindset that it's my job to make others around me successful. And I think that is a core principle and a foundation that a leader has to have. And I've said this before, that many times that if you want to accept that responsibility of manager, supervisor, vice president, president, team leader, whatever your title is, director, you need to accept that with that is not just a career progression and maybe more compensation, but it actually involves dealing with human capital, real lives, and shaping their careers and building success on others. Just like coaching, you need a strong bench, you need a strong starting five on the basketball court, you need that sixth man, right? You need a strong bench. And a leader and a coach has to recognize that it's their job to make those playing in that space, whether if it's leading a CFO, making sure that that CFO has the right analytical tools to do the financial analysis necessary, has the right staffing to ensure that they have the time to get the close by the 10th of the following month, whatever your standards are. You can't just demand and not hope that they are well prepared to meet those demands. And so it's my job to come to work every day in order to do that. So, for example, today it's a Monday morning. I'm on a number of boards, and a couple of boards in particular have some pressing topics that it's not for me to decide. It's not for me to make a decision. It's for me to support. When you serve in a board capacity on public company boards or private company boards or volunteer boards, we have a role of governance and influence. And we're not oftentimes the doer in the field, right? That's the employees. And so my job today was in thinking about a couple of these different scenarios. How can I help best to ensure that those executives are successful on this particular topic that we're dealing with? And sometimes, Jim, it is not only through my direct involvement. Maybe I'm working through another board member, or I'm working through another executive to offer support and help. In that, you need to be mindful in doing board work that the executive team can only hear from so many board members. So I'm always very mindful of that. I don't want to task someone with hearing from me and 7 other board members on the same topic, right? We should be more organized on our end. So that's being thoughtful. That's because I care about that executive in that role. And so I approached today that today's a heavy board day. And then tomorrow, as I looked at my schedule for tomorrow, I have a number of investments that I'm partners in, that I have some tactical work to do there and strategize, and excited about those opportunities to maybe get a little further in the weeds as a shareholder of a company. And so I prioritize my week, making sure that, number one, I'm serving other people. Number two, as I mentioned earlier, that I'm taking care of myself. I'm making sure that I'm getting my exercise in every day this week, all 5 days. My meal plan's on target. I'm eating healthy. I'm nourishing myself, my body and my mind, so that I can be there to serve others. I'm going to make sure that I have the right amount of rest. I'm going to have the right amount of time reading. I'm going to have the right amount of time in social engagement with family members and friends. And of course, through all that is my partner, my wife, and there to be very supportive for her as well. So, every week is different. Every day is different, depending on which company I'm focusing on.
Yeah, that's good. And you didn't say this, but what I heard you say with the words is available, and that you're making yourself available. You're having to really think through, how do you not just be available today, but how do you sustain availability? How do you posture yourself in a way that you can add value to these relationships? And I think that's kind of what I was hinting towards. I want to be, as a leader, I want to be more available. And in order to do that, I really have got to ask myself some not easy questions, difficult questions to answer. Like what are to do an evaluation, to, as you said, to look in the mirror, but relationally and in my heart, but also in my approach. So, for example, what things am I doing that I really shouldn't be doing? Maybe they don't need to be done. Maybe someone else can do them. Maybe somebody else wants to do them. But for whatever insecurity or sense of personal success in that, because I'm good at that or whatever, I continue to do things that I really don't need to do. So it seems like you have worked through some of that. If you have an undergrad in accounting, there might be a tendency to get too involved in accounting because accounting, as an example, versus how you said resource your accounting team, or the CFO or whomever. And then I love the comments that you made about taking care. I think Stephen Covey called it sharpening the saw. Taking care of yourself physically, relationally, spiritually, mentally. All of those things are so important. Johnny, so many executives that I work with, and I love them to death. But they, and not to hurt their feelings, but sometimes they just look like a cat on a hot tin roof. They're just their paws are going everywhere, and they're falling off the roof, and they're holding onto the roof, and they're making a lot of noise, and sometimes when somebody gets in that position where it seems like everything is out of control, everything's a 911. How can they lead themselves back to a more strategic perspective? And I know we're just scratching the surface, but I'm sure you've experienced that personally, I would think. And if you and I know that you've seen other executives. How have you coached them about, whatever you want to call it, get a grip, realign, reassess, get back? What kind of advice would you give to that leader who's finally listening to a podcast, for example, and they get this one and they're saying, geez, I am so, I'm putting in X amount of hours per week. I've got this going on, I got that going on, and I can never seem to do anything well, and just kind of skimming the surface, surviving. I mean, how do they get out of that? Once they're in, it's like quicksand. How do they get out?
So I'm going to use a word that you mentioned a few minutes ago that I think is the root cause of all of that noise that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. It is noisy,
insecurity.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Insecurity.
And it's the word insecurity. So insecurity, to me, in my experience, insecurity is the root of all workplace conflict. And it's also the root of inner conflict. And so what I would say universally, and a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, is that they have a lot of insecurities that they have not dealt with, and they're outwardly projecting them on others. I know that I have a lot of insecurities. We are all human. We are all looking to feel valued, respected, needed. And at times, because we may not have a hold of those emotions and those needs that we're clinging on to because of insecure thoughts that we have, or not even acknowledging. That's one of those looks in the mirror scenarios that I talk about, right? You look yourself, a hard look in the mirror, and see what your insecurities are. See what you're
Johnny,
not confident.
Yeah, Johnny, how do we do this? I mean, give some examples of how we project insecurity on others.
So one way is by not relinquishing control. And so, and I'm gonna speak to it in a moment about our examine of conscious and asking the why question. But oftentimes we find ourselves with the insecure feeling that if I give this authority over to someone else and I let them make that decision and it goes well and they make the right decision, then they're going to get the credit. People are going to praise them. So I need to stay close to this on my team so everyone knows that I get credit for it.
Yeah, that's just weird.
Close enough to it.
Yeah,
right?
that's
And leaders, Jim, want to be applauded. Many leaders, and anything I say is not a universal truth, but it is a generality.
Yes.
Leaders want to ensure that they get that next rung up the ladder, that they move upward continually. And one of the ways that they move upward is by gaining credit or garnering attention for something positive that just resulted, as opposed to deflecting that as a good leader and saying, my team did that. Yes. And I'm so incredibly proud of them.
Which is true.
They recognized a problem. They came up with solutions. They asked me for some thoughts. I gave a few thoughts on it, and then they took it from there. And that success they made happen. That is what a good leader does. It's shining a spotlight on them. And so that the organization can see that those individuals are valuable, and it puts them in a more promotable position for the future. A lot of people are insecure that if their underlings on their team get promoted or moved to another division, that's going to require more work for them. So they're insecure about, can I reproduce another great leader behind that one if they get promoted out of my span of control? And so they will make actions accordingly if they are worried about losing that person, or if they're worried about not getting the attention, right? Or if they're worried about, if the person fails, that it's a reflection on them. And ultimately, as the person in charge, anytime there is failure, our leadership comes to question. And we might have to own the fact that honest look in the mirror that says, they weren't set up for success. There were barriers and blockers to them getting this done. And in our large corporation, I know what those are. I know the IT department is too busy with work right now, and they needed better IT tools, and they tried to execute this initiative without the right IT support behind it, and therefore it failed. I should have seen that coming. I should have known that that was a possibility. I should have asked them if they had those in place. And so some of that could be on us. And again, we're insecure. And so I'm a big believer, Jim, in that we need to know exactly why we feel the way that we feel about certain things. And so when you say, how do you deal with those insecurities, you need to examine why you have them. And what is it that you're afraid of losing? Control, authority, respect. What is it? And I know that not many leaders want to lose control, authority, or respect. And so they make some decisions at times that ultimately cause the loss of control, authority, and respect because they didn't know why they were acting that way. And so that's what that look in the mirror can do, is ask yourself the why question. Why do I feel this way?
What about the guy or the gal that folds their arms, so to speak, leans back and basically says afterwards, I told you so?
You know, that is,
I know you've seen it. Right? I know you've seen it.
that's weak. And so the person that says, I told you so, I would ask that person, did you provide 3 different options that they can choose from? Mm-hmm. And what are the downsides scenarios to each of those? Mm-hmm. And if you did, okay, and you were thoughtful in it, not just saying, I wouldn't do that, but don't explain further why, then you're not really leading. A good leader, there can be a moment said in the right way, in the right tone, that, you know, I suspected this could happen, and that's why I offered you 3 other solutions. And I presented to you the downsides of what could happen if you went down this path. So I'm not surprised that we're here, but it's probably a valuable lesson that you learned and experienced it yourself. And it's maybe one of those things that you don't walk away from it changed until you have it happen to you once. And so this isn't an I told you so moment. It's a I'm not surprised that we're here moment.
Yeah.
And it's okay that we're here, and now we're going to pivot and project and change course of action. But we're not going to forget the lesson learned.
And maybe the difficulty is, as a leader, when you see something coming, trying to figure out whether it's something that we can allow to fail versus something we feel like maybe we shouldn't allow to fail, and knowing when to step in and when not to step in. That can be, that can have a lot to do with our insecurities too. Could it not? Not be able to objectively say, well, it might be good for Bobby to go ahead and see if that will work, and maybe it will work. But in my experience, most of the time it doesn't work, and so we're not going to hang the guy. But we think, hey, this he's probably going to learn more through seeing this through. On the other hand, we see somebody heading for a train wreck, and then we do everything we can because it will impact more than that micro situation, might have macro effects that we'd be practicing poor leadership, to say the least, if we just look the other way. So Johnny, you're
Jim,
leading.
let me comment on that
Yeah.
for a second, because I am a believer in allowing teachable moments to play out.
Yeah.
So long as
So am I.
they're not going to have a negative impact on others that is truly damaging, right? So, in a decision, buy this product or use this manufacturing process or this manufacturing process, I can allow that to play out and have a teachable moment. If a decision is going to cause harm to another employee, whether it is career risk harm or it is feeling valued harm, I'm a little less tolerant of that. But in general, I'm very supportive of teachable moments, and I also feel the responsibility to ensure that we don't have catastrophic moments. Right? Big difference between the two.
Yeah, that's good. So as we kind of step out of leading ourselves, and we're moving now towards the science and the art of leading others, and we talk about aligning our organization, our team, towards directional alignment, and we're also talking about the culture of that. And as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast every morning, and I've come to truly believe that. We're not saying that strategy is important, but it does seem to pale in comparison to a culture that has been designed on purpose versus one that it just exists out of default. And moving towards that, what have you found as a leader that helps you align your teams and your organization, and creates the culture? I guess the three words that I wrote in my notepad here that I was kind of hoping that you would address with your experiences: how do you get alignment? How are you developing culture? And how do you hold people accountable to both of those?
First of all, I love that quote. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think I shared that recently on social media. I absolutely love it. And the reason why I love it is because strategists feel that it's all about their intelligence of making sure that we have a great plan in place. And they forget about the human capital, that the culture, that strategy must exist within so it can perform and manifest and reach the desired outcome. And so culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And I think Peter said that with the first meal of the day, breakfast, because he didn't wait to say dinner. He said breakfast because it happens right away. Yes. Culture can kill early in the day a good strategy. And so, number one, a leader has to recognize the importance of culture. Many today still do not, or they have professions of their faith in a culture where they say how important culture is, but they allow a subset and negative culture to exist in their company because there's performance that's happening. The group is accomplishing, they're hitting their goals, they're beating their numbers. And the culture may be substandard to the mission of the organization, but they don't want to risk it because they might lose sales, right? Wow. And they might hurt profits.
Wow.
That is not a full belief in culture. That's situational cultures where you'll use it at times, but I have a situational belief in the value of a culture. But if I'm winning, then I'm at the all cost mindset. And that's extremely dangerous. So, like I said, people don't acknowledge that culture is critical, or if they say it, they don't always live it. The next piece is, you lead to alignment of aligning to ensure that there are consequences when you step out of the culture. That culture is not about just creating an ideal and a vision statement and part of your mission that you can theorize on. It is actually about aligning to day-to-day actions, moment decisions, and ultimately interactions that one employee has with another. And that culture has to be aligned all through our actions, our strategy, our interactions, and how we treat each other. And if you don't have alignment there, and alignment means, clearly everyone's on board and they understand what happens if they aren't on board, is going to lead me to accountability. Because in behavioral science, it's very well known and studied that college students in a classroom, number one, they want to know what the expected behavior is. Just want to know, how am I supposed to behave? And number two, they simply want to know what happens if I don't behave that way.
Yeah.
Because if they don't behave that way and the answer is you get a detention, they might say, I can handle detention. I don't have anything to do after school anyway. No big deal. So, you need to know what the expectation of behavior is and what happens if you don't meet that expectation. That leads to accountability. And so once everyone is aligned, then how are we holding them accountable to meeting the cultural standards that we put in place, not only so that people, and I do want to talk about this in a moment, what we send our employees home with, Jim, so don't let me forget that.
Okay,
but
I'll write that down.
It's important that we hold them accountable to these behavioral standards that we have, because we believe that our culture will directly impact us getting our desired professional outcome, meeting our goals, our standards, customer service, whatever it might be, that there's a direct connection. And when people aren't held accountable to that, then the thoughts on culture are merely that. They're thoughts, there may be some words, and there's nothing else. And what many leaders allow is an accomplished producer to fall out of the line and the limits associated with what the culture and the alignment needs to be, because those rules don't apply to them. And that's a terribly dangerous place to be in.
Yeah, when I speak to leaders like yourself, it seems like what we're squeezing out is that, when we talk about individual character of a person, that in the final analysis, we're talking about what they do. Because they could talk a good game, but if they don't follow up with it, we know there's a character, situation. And so to oversimplify, character is what we do. It seems to me that culture is the same thing, but it's applied to a group. It's applied to a team, a place, an environment. That in the end, culture is what we do. We might say we do this, we might say we do that, or believe this or believe that, but in the end, especially when the pressure's on, then it really does reveal. When I'm under pressure, it reveals, at least the strength of my character, or the opposite of. And the same with the company's culture. When the stress is on, how do we, and it's not meant to be about perfection, but we have to talk about these things. We have to prepare, because we know that many companies, many ministries, they hit a stride where, it's a heyday and things come easy, it seems. But then there's another season where just the opposite, is true. And it's interesting what gets revealed in our lives when things are too easy and when things are very difficult. And the same for an organization. I've heard quotes about both, but I think in totality, both situations, both seasons help us look in the mirror, as you said when we started this whole conversation about leadership. You wanted to remind me, I've got another question to ask you about insecurity and how it relates to culture and alignment, but I'm going to remind myself on that. But let's go back to what you asked me to remind you. You said something about what you want to send the home with the employees.
That's right. And so when we think about the culture, again, I'm a believer in culture because it's the right thing for humanity, and it's the right thing to be able to achieve our stated goals and mission that we have at the organization. But I want to challenge employers to take that a step further. Leaders, whatever role that you're in, if you're a physician, if you are hospital administrator, if you're a business exec, if you are a line leader in a factory, that when you, again, accept that title that gives you an increased pay or increased responsibility or authority, it's not only about the employee in the workplace, them performing. We should be mindful that how are things at home? And that if I create a bad environment at work and I send that person home with negative energy, negative thoughts, feeling beat up and abused all day long, that I'm taking that energy and I'm sending them into the workplace, from the workplace, into the home place. And that's not right. And when we do that and there's problems in that home, we have guilt and responsibility associated on our end. Take it on the inverse. I said this 30 years ago, and I'm embarrassed that I would say it, that at times, employee, you have this challenge at home, but you can't bring your work problems. Excuse me. You can't bring your home problems into work.
Right.
And I need you to leave that at home, and I need you to focus it here at work because you have responsibilities. And there's truth to it. If you're a physician, if you're a nurse, you're a surgical nurse, those problems can't go into the operating room with you. So there is truth with it. But there is a challenge associated with it that if they bring that mess from home into their workday, there's a greater probability that there will be workplace errors. And in the medical community, that could be life-threatening. In a manufacturing environment, that could be life-threatening for safety reasons. So just like we're mindful that what they bring from home into work that we need to care about, we should ensure also that we care about what they bring from work into home. And I don't think employers really think about that. They don't think about the treatment that a mother or father has of their children when they go home if they were mistreated at work, because they think that their job is, I don't have to worry about the employee at home. I just need to worry about them at work. I think our employers today need to not only worry about their employee at home, a big portion of the way they worry is through healthcare, ensuring that they have the right healthcare plans in place to ensure that their home life can be as stress-free medically and from a behavioral health standpoint as possible so that they can perform at work. We cannot forget this loop in this circle. So we create problems at work and we send them home with it. They create problems at home based on those thoughts. They come back to work with that negative energy, and that negativity just keeps cycling. At some point, we need to intervene because their work is now compromised and their home life is compromised. And I think that we have a responsibility there to care about it. I'm not saying that we can solve every problem at home that people have, because we don't know all of those circumstances. But we have a hand in the way that we send an employee home mentally. And again, it goes back to that question, when you look in the mirror, do I care?
And maybe that's what Stephen Covey was talking about, when he wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about living a principle-centered life, because it is so overwhelming for us as humans to have all of these different environments in our lives. And if we're constantly feeling like we have to change channels, it may not be the best way that our Creator made us, versus think about the principles that guide us. Like, as you said, when I asked you, well, how do you lead yourself, Johnny? And you talked about it. You talked about looking at yourself in the mirror. You talked about eating right, exercising, your relationships, those kinds of things. Because those things radiate, maybe is better, radiate through every area of our lives. So if maybe leaders can get that concept, because I'm afraid that many don't. I'm afraid that they try to compartmentalize, their different environments, and they lose themselves in the process, where they find themselves, in the principles. I wanted to ask you a question, get your opinion on this. You made me think about stuff. Every time I hear you talk, you bring back different places in my life. Truly appreciating your insights. So, I'm not involved in as many boards as you are. I think you must have the world record on how many boards you're involved with. I'm just kind of teasing you, but I do sit on many teams, and I would say that all teams have some dysfunction. Some function much better than others, and some I might even call very healthy teams. And, I guess one of the things that I want the listener to hear is that, you don't need to trash wherever you're from and say, oh my God, yeah, it's totally not like what Johnny's talking about. But, one of the things that my mentor taught me years and years ago is that if you want change, the first thing you need to do is identify what is, and then take a look at what could be, and then create, your plan of moving from what is to what could be, and be patient. But I have an idea. When you were talking about insecurities and the stupid things that we do as leaders because of our insecurities, and then you kind of start walking us down the path of recognizing them, trying to figure them out, and why, the why behind the insecurities. There's one particular team that I'm on that I thought of, and it's a leadership team of let's see, it's 2, 4, I think it's 7 of us, and when we get into pretty heated discussions, I've just recognized consciously, based upon what you've been talking about, that we actually talk about our insecurities in the midst of trying to make decisions. Like, for example, someone might say, well, you know what scares me about that? You know what makes me feel intimidated about that? Or in fact, I think some have even said insecure about that. And then they would explain those things. Now that I think about it, that is one of the most healthy teams that I sit on, because we recognize our insecurities in situations, and we're able to, I don't know what the right word is, Johnny, I'm thinking of a washing machine. We're like washing the dirt out of it, as we're working through it. And then we become aware of each other's insecurities and actually can help one another. That came to me as you were talking about alignment, culture, accountability, and then prior to that, when we were talking about insecurities. I want to quote you again here, because this is really, really important. You said that you believe that the root of all workplace conflict and inner conflict is insecurity. And then you went on to talk about, the smelly part, which is we outwardly project these things upon others. So it comes out one way or another. It comes out. I guess that's my point. My point is, you, as a leader, you can let it come out in these poisonous, toxic ways, or you can be in a place, hopefully, where you can talk with other like leaders and work on it in this way. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's critical to open up, because if you don't, and you just let your insecurities pour out and act out, you're left with people looking at you and just thinking, he or she is an awful person. Yeah. They're awful. They're cruel. They're mean. They're inconsiderate. They're rude. And when really, if they opened up their truth and their insecurity and talked about it, they said, I feel this way because this experience happened to me in my career, and I'm starting to get little flashbacks from it, and it's making me uncomfortable. And because of that, I'm leaning to want to say a certain thing, but I don't know if it's really appropriate in this situation, or if it's my past baggage that I'm carrying with me. If I said that and then said, okay, now let me drop my bomb, they might not look at me as so awful.
Yeah.
Versus not giving that disclaimer and then just dropping the bomb. And so now you're having an honest moment with people to say, I'm going to say something, and I don't know exactly why I feel it, but it is, and it's not going to sound great, but for some reason I'm thinking this, and I have a feeling I know why I'm thinking it.
Wow, that's good.
Wow. You're human then. And I had no problem admitting my vulnerabilities to the people that I served. I had no problem saying, you know so much more about logistics than I do. Educate me. Let me understand your logic. And I was responsible for the logistics team. And there was manufacturing, or excuse me, distribution processes put in place and millions of dollars spent on equipment for pick and packing, on inventory management. And there were people on the team that specialized in that space, people that we recruited to come in because they were so talented. I can't be insecure, Jim, with the fact that they know a heck of a lot more than I do about distribution, yet I'm in charge of distribution.
Yeah.
I can't be insecure about that.
Yeah.
I've got to own that. I have strengths and talents. This person comes on with a specialty, a degree in the space, 10 years leading a multi-billion-dollar organization in distribution. My team is better with him or her on my team. They know more than me. I want people around me like that. Some leaders can't accept that. And so
they can't do that.
They will then, no, they can't admit that.
Right.
Because so then what they do is this person brings their expertise to the table. They make suggestions. It's foreign or new to the leader because that's not their space. And then they challenge them. They give them a hard time. They micromanage. They put doubt because they've never seen it that way before. And the worst thing they could possibly do or say is, well, that's not how we do things here. Oh, that's how you did it at your multi-billion-dollar corporation. And we're so successful that we recruited you away and brought you to us. But now that you bring it here, you got to do it the way that we do it, right? It's crazy. And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Because that person with new institutional knowledge in a space comes into an organization, and immediately that person is an insecurity trigger to everyone around them, right? They're sizing her up and down to see if she really knows as much as she professes that she knows. They are challenging those to say, well, that's crazy. We did something like that here and it didn't work before, but it was likely because we did it without her expertise, without her knowledge. That's where insecurity bleeds in. And so I've heard it said so many times before. I was brought to this organization because of my quality assurance experience that I've had over the last 15 years. And I find myself getting here and not able to institute any new programs on quality because I'm being bucked and challenged and pushed back from the people who created the quality challenges that your company has today.
Wow.
And what happens that is so alarming to me is because of longstanding relationships in the company, that CEO may listen to the people that he or she has worked with for 15 years, and then they run that talent out of the company because that they were bucking the system. They were creating opposing views that were new, which was exactly their job to do it. And all of what I just described, insecurity is the root of all of that.
I wish I could say I have not seen that or experienced, but I can't. I have seen it.
We all have.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I think there's probably a lot of failure all around in those situations. Sometimes we come in and we don't even know. We come in assuming that this will be welcomed, and we don't know how. We don't realize that we come in out of alignment, and sometimes leaders don't recognize that they want to be liked more than be. When it really comes down to it, they want to be liked more than be effective, and you throw all those things into it, and it's pretty messy thing. That's what makes leadership such a great calling. Such a work that we're never done with, that we're always trying to get better with. This is a leading question, and I know we're getting close to the end here, Johnny, but this is a leading question. But if you disagree with it, please say so. But I think when it comes to vulnerability of our insecurities, or just where we're hurting as a leader, And we need some place to go. We need some place to talk. We need some place to somewhere. We do need to be careful about where we share these things. At least in my experience, when I made some mistakes is I would share in a moment of weakness. I would share in vulnerability, and it wasn't until later that I realized that who I shared it with didn't have the internal stature to be able to deal with it. And to them, it was like, oh my gosh, the plane is crashing. But if I said it to another CEO, he would have got it. It's different at situations. So I guess what I'm asking is, if we're doing the work of recognizing our insecurities, and some of those things we can share with others, is it not important to maybe do a gut check and make sure that when we are sharing, we're sharing it in a context that is appropriate?
Absolutely. I tend to overshare. I'm a communicator. I'm an oversharer. And one of the things that I've been burned on in my career is feeling a connection and trusting someone where they have not earned that trust. I do place trust quickly because I believe in humanity. I believe in the goodness of other people. I feel something when there's a connection with someone that, we connect on a topic of importance, right? Not just a business topic, but something on a greater scale. And I have tended to over trust those relationships. And in operating in a place of my own security, right? In knowing where I am in the organization and how pleased I am to be in that spot. And I really don't need anything else. I was secure in my company of where I sat, that I assume that others feel the same. And I have provided the ammunition at times for others to shoot me. So literally imagine the intruder breaking into your home. I provided them the gun and the bullets. And so, when I've seen myself do that, I've had those moments, Jim, where I've said, I need to learn from that. But ultimately where I've landed is, I'm not going to let that person change the core of who I am. Yes, I need to be more mindful maybe and share a little less and maybe a little less truthful at times. But that's who I am. And that's how I operate. And that's how I connect with people. So I've connected and built relationships with good people exponentially more than I have had damaging relationships with somebody that had a different heart than mine. I'm not going to call them bad people. I'm just going to say they had a different heart than mine and different values and beliefs than me. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. No one has to think the way that Johnny thinks, right? Everyone is entitled to their own thoughts and beliefs and how to protect themselves. It's for me to then to determine, once they reveal who they are, if I choose to believe them or not. And, I think we hear that so much today. When someone reveals who they truly are, believe them. A lot of us tend to try to say, oh no, but I see this good quality that she has and he's doing this well and he cares about. And so we try to balance that when they really revealed who they are. So ultimately, I've become more mindful of it, and especially as I age, I think I am much more mindful of it, and I'm able to control my mouth better than I could 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and certainly 20 years ago and 30. But I'm in a position now where I'm really comfortable with who I am and how I see things. And if you don't see it that way, God bless you. More power to you. That's all okay. We're just not meant to connect on a more meaningful level. And I walk away now without judgment of feeling, I don't need to say, he's a bad guy, she's awful. I don't need to say that. We're different, and it's fine.
Johnny, thank you for sharing that. Everything that you've shared today is very helpful. This last part is, at least it was for me, because I think maybe, and this is pretty high level now. We're at a pretty high level in this conversation that many may not connect with, but the ones that do connect with what we're talking about right now will really be ministered to and helped. And I think that as altruistic as you are, I mean, that's how I see you. Sometimes it lacks the wisdom of Solomon, right? Where he can see things, and I know that I too, and to use your words, have handed some a gun and the bullets, because I want to have fellowship at certain levels of leadership so bad that I might welcome those who just are not there. They're just not at that place. Now there is help for all of us, but it may not be convenient help. And that's the thing that we have to be careful with. Especially if you're in a place in your career where others do have the ability to harm what it is that you've been trying to do and what you're trying to do. Really important. I knew this was going to be a great talk. Now, before we sign off, I know you got a lot in that head of yours. Anything that you want to send us off with?
Jim, I agree. This was a lot of fun talking. I always appreciate your wisdom and your insight and the questions that you pose and the thoughts that you have. And so I'm thankful for that. So thank you for having me back. And, I want to encourage leaders out there to know what their motive is and at least be honest with themselves. If their motive is more money and more power, at least know it. And then think about the best way for them to go about getting it with the least harm to others. If their motivation is to get more authority, and power and authority are very different, right? Authority where you can have influence over people. I love Ken Blanchard's definition of leadership is leadership equals influence. Then think about the best way that you can gain that influence, and while lifting others up and helping them, and without at a cost to someone else. And so that self-examination that I asked for, don't be so quick to disparage and rule out technology and thoughts that I put out there as that's idealistic, and it is not. It is not idealistic. It is what breeds success in organizations. And I am about bottom line, and I am about results. And I'm a believer that there is a way to achieve the mission and the strategy of the company, doing it the right way. And my experience has shown me when that happens, when you are generally mindful and caring of others, the boat rises when the water goes up. The whole boat goes up and your company goes up. And I've seen the destruction in the other way. And so I would say that it's probably extremely easy to listen to what I'm saying and say, that guy's head's in the clouds, and that's not the real world today. And I would challenge anybody on that. And it is real world to do these things and make a difference, and lifting others up in the process.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I hope that you will become a perennial feature of this podcast and our ministry. You have so much good to share and so much wisdom. I was looking forward to this. I told my wife yesterday, she said, do you have someone scheduled? I said, yep, I got Johnny, and I'm looking forward to it. And it did not disappoint. So, Johnny, I hope you have a great, great day, and thank you so much for giving back again.
Thanks so much. Be blessed.